Baking powder biscuits are a quickly made substitute for bread. If you can make good tea biscuits, you have learned 3 of the 4 most common techniques used in successful baking. For tea biscuits, cut in the fat, as in the pastry method. You pour in the liquids, as in the muffin method. The ball of dough is kneaded, as in the bread method.
Fold it in half and push. Fold it in half and push.
Develop these baking methods and you will have successful products every time.
We're going to show you how to make tea biscuits. Tea biscuits is one name for this product, but only one. Sometimes they're called light cakes, sometimes they're called shortcakes, tea biscuits, baking powder biscuits, but they're all the same thing. They're a little biscuit made with baking powder, which is a quick bread, and it's like a little bun when it's done to have along with your stew, have along with your soup, or anything that you like in place of bread. I'm going to use completely all-purpose flour in showing you how to do it because the technique is what is important. We'll start out by using 4 cups, and I'm actually doubling the recipe because I want to make 2 things out of the same batch for you. 3, 4. 4 teaspoons per 2 cups of flour, which is your main recipe. So now I need 8 teaspoons. 1, 2, 7, 8. 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon per recipe. Mix it up really well. And 1/4 cup of hard fat. You could use hard margarine if you want to. If you were using a sweet tea biscuit, use the gauge on the side. So 1/4 cup and 1/4 cup makes a 1/2 cup, which is what I want. And just simply get a good eye and cut it down. And then cut in. Cut in is a cooking term, and it means cut the fat in to the flour until all the little particles of fat have a little coating of flour around them. And when it hits the oven, these little particles of fat melt, and that's what gives you the texture you want. Now, if you don't have a cutter, use 2 knives, but it's much handier if you have and quicker if you have a pastry cutter. This is the reconstituted skim milk powder that we use. And I'm going to measure out 2 cups. But I'm not going to put all of it in until I find how much I actually need. And this is where the technique really comes into play. So make a hole and hold back. Once you start to mix, you see, I can see that it's dry. I'm going to put in a bit more and try to put it on the dry powder that falls down when you try to do this. Try to get as much in as you can. As I turn it over, you see I'm working with the dough. And as I turn it over like this, I don't see any dry flour falling out, which means that I've probably got enough in. This is what kids love to do. They just love to get their hands into the flour and knead and push and cut and all kinds of things. This process that we're doing here is called knead, and this is like the bread technique. Drop the dough on the flour to let it pick up any excess moisture. Fold it in half and push. Fold it in half and push. We don't want to do this any more than about 8 or 10 times. Don't get excess flour out of the way. We just want to develop enough gluten to make a little smooth ball. A little bit of flour on your hands just helps you. Okay, now that looks like a nice smooth ball. Can you see? I can certainly feel the texture, and I hope that you will be able to see how it looks like a smoother ball. But there's a big part of how things feel when it comes into doing biscuits like this and bread. Form it into a ball. You see all this cracked part down there? Keep it on the bottom. Keep the flour to a minimum. Then you get your rolling pin and put some flour on your rolling pin. Now you roll. Now you roll from the center to the outside and kind of lift the rolling pin, because if you roll like this, which kids are apt to do, you'll have it like a slide. And we want this roll to be as flat as we can. See how I'm lifting the rolling pin as I get to the edge? You go from the center to the outside. Keep that nice smooth top on the top, because this is really fun. Now I think I've got it about 1/2, 3/4 of an inch. Remember, the biscuits will at least double and maybe a little bit more than double in height. So here's our pan ungreased. Use a tin. I like it because of the height. If you try to use a cookie cutter, sometimes the top of the cookie cutter goes into the dough. Dip your cutter in your flour with each cut. Part of the trick of this, if you're going to show them at the fair, is you want to get equal pressure all the way down on the biscuits. You'll see when they come out of the oven how just pushing a little hard on one side will make them have a slanted roof, as we say, on them. Now I'm twisting the cutter a wee bit, and I shouldn't be. I should be able to get right through with one push. Now I made a double batch of biscuits because I want to do something else with the scraps. So I'm not going to use it all, because I know you're going to like the curlicues that I'm going to make with the scraps just as well, if not better, certainly the kids do, than these. But I just want to mention the best biscuit should be the one that's in the middle. So if you're showing them at the fair, you would take one right out of the middle, and that's where I said some of the ladies who really want to win first prize, they'll take it right out of the middle, and then they'll make another batch so that they always have one out of the middle. We'll put these in the oven, 450 oven, with the oven rack fairly close to the top. They're a quick bread, remember, and these are going to just jump when they get in the oven, and it only takes about 8 to 10 minutes, depending on the size of the biscuit, but that's usually the time. So we set the timer for 10 minutes. We'll get them out and move them over to here. They can cool right on this sheet if you want to, or you can pick them up. Ooh, nice light cakes, see? Now, do you remember which one was the center one? I don't. I think they all look about the same, so I don't think these would win any prize. But a light cake has, see this kind of layered look that it has? And it should have nice straight sides. And that's where the cutter is so important, and how you put pressure on the cutter. See, I must have put pressure on the cutter on more on one side than on the other. I think this was the middle one. That one has a flatter top than any of them. But you can see the layered effect that's in them. They're a nice light golden brown. Over baking them is a problem. And when you open a tea biscuit, you should find a kind of layered look. When it's opened like that, you can see it's not a crumb like a cookie or a cake. It has a little bit of a bread texture. You can pull a piece like this and you can pull off a whole layer. And that's what the judges should be looking for when they open the tea biscuits, to see what the texture is like. And that is created by the use of lard and by the technique that we used. These, remember, are an imitation bread. They're a quick bread.